Welcome to Om Times TV, a division of Om Times Media and Broadcasting. Welcome to Adventures in Consciousness, the interactive show that offers expansive conversation with pioneering new thought teachers and personal real-time guided journeys into the imaginal realm to access your soul's wisdom and discover how to live your greater story. Here is your host, human potentialist, soul mentor, and consciousness guide, Jennifer Evanko.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Adventures in Consciousness, the conversation. So today, I had a very special topic I'd like to share with you. My mother recently passed, Sally Wilt Clifton. She left her body on September 25th, rather suddenly. As a spiritual healer, I know this is the beginning of an adventure for her. Of course, as a human, was shocked and in that kind of numb space for a while of trying to deal with human affairs and the funeral and whatnot. But as a spiritual healer, as I said, we know there's a transition that happens that is as beautiful as a birth. It's the other side of our life, and it's something we want to understand more and to make as graceful and peaceful as possible and evolutionary as possible. So I wanted to have a conversation today with a dear friend. But before we start, I wanted to mention, just so we have the languaging or an understanding, we talk about this reality where we are as this world of form or world of our reality and a very human place. And then we have this beyond or the invisible, or I said in the introductory, the imaginal. Some people call it the Akashic. It's this place that's in between our reality and the whether you want to call it source or heaven, or it's this transition place. This is a place we go in our meditations, and a place we go in our dreams, and a place we go when we pass. At least in my understanding and experience, there's a period of time that we spend in this threshold, this beyond. So today I'd like to talk about consciousness after death. And I have a dear friend who'd like to join us now. She's coming on. There she is, Leanne Hetzel, who some of you might remember from a previous show. She's a beautiful artist. You can see behind her one of her paintings that we'll talk about at the very end, hopefully. But she also, another hat that she wears, and something I've known her for years in doing, is a life-to-death transitionalist, or a death doula. Is that the right word? Yes. So we're going to talk about this consciousness during the transition and then after death. Welcome, Leanne. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jen, for having me back again.
It's always such a pleasure, and so easy to have this kind of a conversation with you because we can go very deep in that place. And so I want to talk a little bit about first about your experience of being a life-to-death transitionalist. What does that mean?
Yeah, so for me, it actually started out earlier in my life of working with souls that had not fully crossed over, or ghosts, or energies, people that for whatever reason, souls that are still tethered to this plane, and then later it evolved into helping people as they were actively dying from the side of spirit. So being with them in those last days or weeks or hours, and assisting them in whatever they needed. And so regardless if it's somebody that actually left this plane 100 years ago, or somebody that's in the process of going through it today, my only role is safe passage, and my question is only, what do you require?
That's beautiful. There's a few things you said there that I'd like to go back to. But first, this came to you when you were very young, right? You've had this experience of...
Yeah, I came in with this. There wasn't, I didn't choose to do this work, and there was, I didn't go through training. It wasn't a conscious choice. It was something that I came in with. And as I um, grew into adulthood, it wasn't anything that I was doing, as a child or a teenager, but was a capacity that as I started focusing on my spirituality, my human potential, those capacities, it was just like, oh, it's there and it's always been there. Um, so it's an interesting thing because I didn't love it at first, right? Um, I would always kind of go, oh yeah, I can do that. And it wasn't until I really owned it and fully understood what this gift was and that it is a gift. And because, it's not always pleasant. The experiences are not always pleasant. If it's somebody, that's committed suicide and the family's wanting me to check on them, um, you know, it's it's not always beautiful, and it always ends up being that way. But so yeah, there's been an acceptance of it for me over the years.
Well, there's also, in my experience, a connection with the higher self when you're working with this. You're working at the human level, but you're also working with what the soul wants. What is going on? Is this your experience as well?
Yes, so I really find that I can interact with two levels on a person. So, knowing the concept that we're multidimensional, I can communicate with the person that when I see it on like a range of levels, the highest self, or what I refer to as the fully realized divine self, that soul level. And then more importantly, I can communicate with them on this level where they're still very conscious about their physical body and what they're experiencing, but they're out of that physical being enough and going into that transitional space that you spoke of earlier. So there's still a great degree of free will there. That's where there could be a lot of confusion or fear, or and that's the space that I work in the most, because that's the space. Let's say it's a person, they're you know elderly, maybe they're unconscious, they're in this process of actively dying, and so in that space there can be a lot of fear and confusion, because it's not, they're in that process of crossing. And so my role is coming in with the what do you require, makes that transition more graceful and more easeful. And a lot of times, remarkably, things that maybe that soul came in to accomplish in this lifetime, maybe they didn't. Maybe they did A, B, and C, but they didn't get to, like a few other things. Sometimes those things can be accomplished right at those last moments. Yeah.
It's interesting. In my own experience with that transition, I didn't have it in the same way that you do, with that understanding that I'm a to death transitionalist. But I've worked in that meta, that beyond, and come across or been connected with some souls that are trying to get to that light, or trying to, but they don't know. There's that confusion you mentioned, or that fear, or that, and as having somebody that has passed close to me, we can sometimes have that same fear or confusion or energy. We're getting it from that loved one who is still in this between. We also feel it. And understanding, I mean, I always thought when you die, I used to think when you die, you suddenly were enlightened. You saw the angels and you were there. But there is a period, there is time. From our human side point here in form, a lot of cultures say it's a 70-day period where we are transitioning. Of course, on the other side, there's no time. Like you mentioned, 100 years, they could have died 100 years ago, or now. There's no time. But there is a period where you can interact with them to help them transition, where any of us can support.
Yes.
transition. But that fear and that not
Mhm.
connecting into or getting wrapped around into that emotion instead of trying to, how do you help them out of that fear?
So typically, and I say typically because every single time is a unique experience. There's been some crazy ones. I call them in, regardless of what ends up happening. It begins with me calling that person in, and let's say, as an example, somebody's reached out to me and says my mother or my father, is in the process of passing, and can you check in on them? Can you do whatever may be needed to assist them? And so if I call somebody in that doesn't know me, I will call in, and we'll use your mom as an example. I'll say, if she didn't know me, um, your daughter Jennifer has invited me to assist you. And so I literally see them coming into not a room, but a dimension. And they'll come in or not come in. And a lot of times it's like, I don't know you. So I might present that, right? Which loved one requested it from me, and then I'll check back in a day. And because I see this, there's always like this white light around them, and I know that that's either a higher dimensions of them or angels, or I don't tag a name to it, but that white light that I see, I know is communicating with them. So the next time I check in, they're typically right there. Or there's times where the person doesn't know me. This about a year ago, um, woman, asked me to assist with her father. I'd never met him, and I said, so and so, your daughter has asked me to be here, and he was like, boom, front and center, and he goes, well, aren't you a cutie? Because the personality is still there, right? And so later when I said, because I always share exactly what happens, right? And she's like, yep, that's my dad. He would have said that to you if he met you in person. So there's always this invitation first.
I like that. I mean, as again, as a spiritual healer, to me, it's always an invitation. And this is a healing that you're doing when you're helping somebody transition. But whenever we're working with any soul individual, there's the free choice and the invitation. That's beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. So then you connect with the person, and you find, is there, once they have I would assume the person, the soul coming to you, feels more comforted knowing that they can communicate with somebody at that point, that would help.
Yeah, and as you were actually posing that question, I was thinking to myself, because I never had this thought to myself, is if somebody had passed 100 years ago, or if somebody was actively dying right now, are those two experiences different? And they're really not, which is really interesting. Um, so it's just this, any anything can be presented. It's this, um, sometimes I see things around the person. If it's somebody that's, let's say, had committed suicide, oftentimes there's some dark energy around that person that we want to clear and neutralize before they pass on. um, Other times people come in with very clear messages. I am not passing because of this. Right? Like one woman, she was, elderly, had been unconscious for weeks, and her um, daughter finally reached out to me, because when people kind of shy away from reaching out to me because they know my loved one's gonna pass, right? Like quicker probably. So she finally reached out to me, and she's like, we can't figure out, we don't understand it. Like everything's in order. We don't know why she's hanging on. And she came through the very, very simple concern, but it was tethering her. And it was, I'm afraid that my daughter and son are going to fight over my estate. And that was enough to hold her, to bind her to this reality. And so, this communication that comes through is coming through me. And as I understand it, it's coming through me because I'm a human on this earth and I'm closer to that dimension of them and can communicate with them. But it's absolutely coming from Christ consciousness through me. So it's coming from the divine. And so the words spoken are to her in that particular time was, oh, no, 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 it's okay. That's not going to happen. Your estate will not cause any issues with your daughter and son. But the energy that comes through that communication, that's the profound part, because it really is speaking to this person's spirit. And I watched, her kind of realize that, like, oh, really? Okay. And then the work was done. It can be that quick. And that was, I don't know, I would say maybe like 3:30 in the morning. And about 4:15, she texted me and said my mom passed. So, it's just this really graceful, simple, kind of quick process. Because that's all I'm doing is saying, what do you require? I'm not doing anything else. Like, there's all these roles, and I feel like mine is very specific.
That's beautiful. I like how you bring it back to the energy, to the there's something beyond words in that energy, and the words are just that human side of understanding, but the energy is that portal or that doorway or that ability to release and let go. There's more understanding and bliss and love in that energy.
Yeah, that's what's really happening. I feel that the conversation's happening just because of that particular dimension,
Mm-hmm.
so that that humanness that we're used to experiencing, there's a value to that for that person that's going through this death process. So, but it's really the energy, which is actually more important when we communicate always, right?
Yeah.
Somebody could say love you, but you know when there's that energy of love coming through a person, they could say, don't forget your coat. And that it's that love that's pouring through. So
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. I had experienced it. I just like to bring back the time that, I mean, you're working a lot with people that are dying now in that process.
yes.
And I remember one time, it was actually in Salem, Massachusetts, of all places. I was there with a healer that we were working with. We opened a house and we're working with people coming in with, back pains or different things. But there were two spirits in the house in Salem that were still in the house. Now, it doesn't mean they've been there for hundreds of years for on their side.
Right.
It's just a moment for them. But from our side, it was they had passed in the 1800s. And we were doing this healing work that the energy, the lines were open, the angels were here, and I like to work with Mother Mary, and that intense energy became a little bit intenser. We were working on one person here that's alive, and the two spirits were in the room, and the energy became intense for them to be able to cross, and it was helping this person here. But it was just interesting to see as we raised the frequency, got the energy up, these spirits were able to connect and move into that energy and then move beyond.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So I loved you have to know for Leanne and I, part of our connection is she has this Christ consciousness energy connection, and I have this Mary connection, and together it just has been magical. We've had a lot of synchronicities in our
Yes.
life. Yes. So we've talked about this conscious or this experience of dying, of separating. There's this period we separate from our bodies, and you're helping going into that light. But right now, this is a period also of right this month, these October, November, we're in this time of the Day of the Dead. or Mexico, or commemoration of death, or Halloween, or there's kind of that thinning of the veil where all of us can be in connection with our loved ones that have
Yes.
passed, animals and people, our pets. Do you have any experiences with the seasons, the changings? Does this happen more that you can be in connection with that?
Yeah, I tend to feel more of this time of year when those veils thin. It is, that historical time to talk with people that are on the other side. And I can't explain it, but for me, I know that my role is that during the transition process. And so I have very little experience with once people are on the other side. In the past, people will say, "Can you please talk to my whatever mother or father? They passed 3 years ago, and we know they're on the other side." And I will do it because the person's asked me to, but it's not the same. It's not the same experience for me. So I just always say once the person's over,
Mm-hmm.
um, that that's somebody else's job.
So when you're saying the other side, you're talking that they've already released the tethers.
Yes.
So we have three stages here. We have they're still physically in the body, breathing and alive. Then
Right.
there's that period that they're still tethered to the body or life, because maybe the body's been cremated or not, but they're not on the other side yet. They haven't transitioned. And you're
Correct.
talking about that period, sometimes in the physical body, but sometimes in that still tethered period.
Correct. That's the space where I work. So once they're untethered, then I I feel like my role's complete. So I I can't explain why, but I know that like I stay in my lane. I know that there's people that are so gifted with those communications once people are untethered, um, but my lane is that tethered piece.
And I think that's where we want to focus today too in this conversation, is that tethered place, and not the beyond. But because to me that's, and again, it can be in human terms, it could be 100 years from our perspective. From their perspective, it's moments. It's like you're in the dreams. That's what you're experiencing in there. So I think it's fascinating to understand, or to begin to try to understand what that person who has passed and is still in that tethered place, which is purely natural. There's a period of time where you are organizing. You've just left the physical body, and maybe you don't know at first, and then maybe you start to understand, and then you have these concerns come up of, did I remember to go get the groceries, or did I remember to finish that work, or did I, little concerns just like we have now, right?
Right. The free will is still activated, and all of that humanness is still there. And oftentimes when this piece is happening, the person is still living and breathing,
Hmm.
right? It's their this tethering piece is a soul transition. So much of the time the person is still, considered alive. And that's, you speak about time, this tethered space, it's leaving this reality too, so yes, there's this fear and free will, but it's not the same as we experience it because it is dimensionally out of the physical body. So when I'm talking with somebody there or interacting with somebody in that space, and they're not in pain, they're not, they are enough out of their physical form, and they might not have complete awareness of that yet, but it's at a different dimension of who they are. And sometimes if there's not enough clarity, or if additional information is needed, or even if the person's saying, communicating something to me, I can also communicate straight with their soul. So, you know, so I get kind of two perspectives.
I was going to say there's the confusion, or the as they're releasing, it's coming out of the mind and the thoughts that make them human. The thoughts that go in our mind all the time that are, we don't even know what we're thinking. It's just habit of what we're thinking. And that step beyond, when we get into that space of connected with our own souls, as I meditate or whatever I do to get into that stillness, that the soul that's tethered and passing is moving between these two self parts of themselves, of
Yes.
still being in their lively thoughts and that other reality of, or their deeper self, their deeper essence. And how do I organize all my experiences and who I am and what I've been in this life and transition into the soul?
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful representation of that process. And I mentioned earlier that there's not been a lot of times it's happened, but there have been a handful of times where the person didn't achieve everything that their soul came here to achieve. And that's one of the reasons, or one of the examples of why I may communicate straight to the soul, because that person's not understanding that there was this big thing, that I came here to accomplish. And so of course that person can transition and most likely incarnate to, complete that task again. I don't know how, how that's going to go, but there is this opportunity, because of the interaction that's happening, to go ahead and have that lesson complete. And so to me, in a lot of ways, it's like they're going into that next stage of their existence with whole, right? And grace filled, and with peace, and whole. And I know that it makes the rest of the journey easier. It helps untether them, which I know is my main role, because a lot of things can keep a person tethered, and it can be as simple as that person feeling the energy coming from their loved ones, like, oh, I can't leave them. Say, that connection, and so a lot of times I'll say to people, you need to untether from them to make it easier for them.
So we're going to come back to that part of it. What can we do, the still living, to help somebody that's going through that process, that period after the physical, but into the still being tethered? So where can we go with that? But let's go to break first, and we'll come back. Thank you.
Real conscious connection. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going Om. My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers, pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
There is no greater mystery in life than you. So why not take a fully experiential plunge into the depths of your being to uncover and retrieve all the secrets and wisdom your soul is crying out for you to know? If you enjoy Adventures in Consciousness, the conversation, you'll love Adventures in Consciousness, the course. Join Jennifer in this unique 13-week series of journeys specifically designed to unlock the mysteries of yourself. Each week, you'll journey progressively deeper into the meta realm, where, freed from the limitations of your mind, you'll get to play and explore the inner and outer reaches of your awareness. The next series of Adventures in Consciousness, the course, is starting soon. Find out more and stake your place at jenniferevanko.com.
There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children, she didn't know what to do. She gave them some broth without any bread and kissed them all soundly.
Lights out.
Good night. And put them to bed. Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org.
Welcome back to Adventures in Consciousness, the conversation. We're here with my guest, Leanne Hetzel, and we're speaking about that transition period of dying, of consciously dying, and of consciousness after death, while you're still tethered to the body. And we'd like to continue with what we can do as still alive and human and relatives and loved ones with those who are passing, who are in that period of untethering. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I have a couple thoughts what the loved ones around them can be doing, and how that person can actually go into that experience. So something that we can be, focusing on now while we're very much alive. But first, yeah, those individuals that are around the person that's in the process of passing is just to be aware, to understand that they are fully there, whether they're unconscious and maybe can't open their eyes and speak to you, but they're there. And so those ways to communicate with them are really, really important, whether you're saying it out loud or you're just saying it from your heart to their heart, because they're in that space where they're in that heightened dimension, right? And so they can feel how you're feeling even more than if they were conscious in their body. And so that communication is really key. And of course it's difficult. It's an incredibly difficult situation because you're losing somebody. You're not going to have them the next day or in this lifetime. But the more conscious we can be in that space and just be the love that we are, and just be in gratitude and hold them in their highest state of grace themselves. We think of death, it's this big horrible thing, right?
Mm.
But it's this beautiful passage. So maybe to think about it as joyful as you would be as a child is being born, to be that joyful for them, for their soul, for this next piece, this next step in their existence, their soul existence.
I like how you say that, for doing it for them, because we want to remember we're human. As I said in the beginning, with my mother passing, there's a human side of me, of course, that's going to grieve and be. My mother is like an anchor. A maternal figure is an anchor, and so I feel a little unstable at the human side. And to be conscious, to be in that, allow that human side to acknowledge and embrace and give yourself time, acknowledge it, and be conscious of this beautiful passage, this transition, to always come back to that journey that they are on, is blessing them and having gratitude that they've been with you on this journey to this time, to this point.
Right, because of course we want that journey to be beautiful and perfect for them, and it isn't a, shouldn't feel like, oh, I didn't do that, so that you beat yourself up. Like, we're human, right? We're where we are at that moment, and that loved one understands that too. But it does. Um, my father had a stroke, and so he was intubated and, nonverbal. And so on the side of spirit, the first time I checked in, I call these check-ins with people. The first time I checked in, um, my nickname was Sis growing up, and he said, "Sis, I need you to, I need you to cut the tie. I need you to cut that tie you have to me." And so at that moment, I knew he was going to pass, right? Because it was early on in the stroke, and the medical team hadn't given up. Like, they were still very much working for his survival. And so as soon as he said that to me, I realized, yeah, I was very much having that human experience of, oh my gosh, my father's, passing. But that was the most important thing I could do for him. And that cutting that tie doesn't mean that love ends. It's not that at all. It's absolutely that tether to this dimension that gets severed. The love never gets
Mm.
severed. There's no way, to sever that. Um, to consciously be there for that person and see what this opportunity is for them and serve them, right? Because everybody's focused on, are you comfortable? Are you in pain? Is the light too bright? Also, be concerned with, um, you know, yes, I'm in pain and this is very difficult for me, but meet them more from your soul level, right? And understand that this is their next grandest adventure.
Right.
This is a natural, you know, piece of the cycle. And that's something that we've absolutely, have forgotten within humanity.
Yeah. Our culture teaches us to have this fear of this next step. But I love this thought of the tether of the love still existing beyond the tether. So if you think of the tether as that anchor in the boat in the water, and the anchor is holding them to this life, to their experiences that they've already finished and had. And if we let them release that anchor and go in the boat and flow into that, they're still them. They're still the love, and they carry their experiences and who they are into their next life. We don't, or
Yeah,
into their beyond.
absolutely. And when I did that with my father, I can't even express the degree of freedom is the human word that
Mm.
I can use to describe it. There was this overwhelming sense of freedom, and it kind of threw me off, like, what? But it was his freedom that I was feeling, and I've since felt that, before. And of course, we want our loved ones to be free.
Mm. Yeah. So, in bringing it back to the personal with my mother, and what we just went through a couple weeks ago, and she was unconscious. She had a brain bleed, so she was not alert at all. She was quietly sleeping for about a day and a half, 2 days before she took her last breath. In that period, she was ready. She was so ready, and this is what you helped me with, just confirming when you checked in with my mom. Was she is just ready. So it was just about having us be ready too, about us just all, as kids, were all over the country we had to all come together. And in this case, she wanted us, I guess, at her side, because as soon as we were all together,
Yeah.
she took her last breath. But it's beautiful to when the soul is ready. Now, there's other times when they're not ready, as you
Right.
said. Mm.
Yeah, see, because if I can share with what happened with your mother, because oftentimes, when I call somebody in, it can be something, um, you know, very simple, like I mentioned earlier, right, about the woman concerned about her estate. And when I checked in on Sally, I was just in this flow of the most beautiful energy. I described it like if I were in a clear capsule just going through the cosmos at a high speed. And I so she didn't come in. That's the experience that I had. So I knew, okay, she's going. She's untethered and she requires nothing.
My mother, for those who have known her, she was quite an adventurer. She loved life. She was the mother. Instead of inside doing the ironing and making special dinners for us, she was out in the pond showing us where the toads were and the frogs and the so she had a zest for just adventure. And so it didn't surprise me at all when you said that she's already.
Yeah. And because I knew her too, I feel like that was a gift she gave me, right? So that I could see her next adventure as well.
So I did want to bring up a couple more things real quick to finish this off. When somebody dies, when they actually have left the body, but they may still be tethered for that period of time, there's some other things that you can do that are helpful, like remembering their favorite smells, their favorite sounds, music. The body might be there in the room. We were in a hospice room and the body was there and we were there for a while. And you think they've taken their last breath and they're gone, but in reality, they're still, the connection is weakening. They're still tethered, so they still are having sensations as humans. So you have the smells and the sense and the hearing, and so making that space as beautiful as you can, if you have that ability.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier too, let's chat a little, just a bit, about going into death more consciously.
Yes.
And because here we are, no plans of crossing, but so how can we become more conscious around death for ourselves? And I never really gave this a lot of thought until a few years ago. I had met a woman in Arizona in stage 4 cancer. She knew she was dying. A highly evolved conscious being, had focused, her adult life on her spiritual growth, and went into the death process really consciously. She felt the fear. Of course, she felt the fear around it, but she made this choice to really understand it within her own spirit, and really explore that. And I had an opportunity to work with her a few months before she actually transitioned, and then I spoke with her even closer to the time of her transition. And when I worked with her, it was myself and 2 other dear friends. She just asked for us to do Reiki or body work, and I had this experience with her that was so beautiful because she was already untethering, from her own conscious experience in this reality. And so her spirit just completely lifted out of her and went into this state of bliss. And I was aware of it happening, being one of the facilitators. And afterwards, she was just, she got a taste of what she was going to experience, which gave her even more peace. And I think actually made her excited, right, about what that next step was. And then I spoke with her a few months later, and I believe you were a part of that conversation, right, where she just said, you know what, it doesn't matter all those things I accomplished. And even I was living my Dharma and doing what I was coming here to do and what I was passionate about, but even none of that mattered. That her wish was for that love that she is to remain in people's experiences. That is almost as if this love was a physical, thing, like a spark, that could reside in other people. That was her wish. So just that interaction of seeing somebody go through that process so consciously, um, she untethered herself. I mean, it was just so beautiful. And it was such a lesson for me.
Mm, mm. And what a lesson too. I mean, I think anybody in this spiritual journey knows the power of love and how insignificant that word is when we try to talk about it, that it's something so much bigger. And to touch it as tethered, we're getting just a taste of it. To imagine what it is when you're untethered and go into that
And
completely.
yes, and be that. And you mentioned my paintings. I have a channel painting that is the frequency of love. And and what I understand about that is love is creation.
Hmm.
Love is God, or the God of your understanding. It literally is that. So for her to want to remain, it's, if to think of it, if we're all fractals of, our soul is a fractal of that love, for her to want some of her to remain in those people here in this realm, it's such a beautiful gift, and an understanding that, there's that concept of, if I can be in that place and contemplate or understand my own death, then I can truly live. Because then it isn't this, oh, that's going to be scary, I'm afraid of that. We can truly live.
With the untethering and going into that place of full love, we also talked about how we're still connected to these ones that we love that have passed, that we get that gift. You said she was very focused on making sure her love lived in the people that she's leaving behind. And it's just made me think while you were saying that, how we want to do something for that one that passed. As a spiritual healer, you want to help them pass, but they are doing something so grand and wonderful for us by giving us a channel, a parting gift, if you will, of this pure love that can come into us if we just receive it.
Yes. And that's happening anyways, right? She just had the awareness that it was happening. But it is this beautiful, that never untethers.
Wonderful, yeah. So I want to mention before I forget, you have a YouTube that you can share with people to of her interview.
Yes, I can. I'll send that to you. Can you add that onto the show?
Yes, yeah, because I guess it's a long.
It's a long, yeah, it's
I'll put it on my
arduous.
website, and also Leanne mentioned your website.
Yeah, my website is my name, leanneheltzel.com.
And yeah, and JenniferEvanko.com. So we'll get it out there. This
Okay.
wonderful interview that Leanne did with this conscious way of dying. This woman did, and of course, this woman had the cancer, and so she had that warning to be able to take that time to be able to consciously die. For the rest of us, I mean, as Leanne said, we don't plan on dying right now or anytime soon. However, what would be the things that would tether us, and being aware of what we could do, especially choosing a time like October, November, when it is about death, in spiritually. So let's pick a time that we can get our thinking in clear about wills or different communications or letters that maybe you need to send, or um, people you need to talk to because you have something unsaid or undone. Ideally, we do this every day or every week. We make sure we're have finished what we need to finish.
Right. And I have information in my will and my testament, that to be opened at my death. And it's an ongoing document, right? Because I'm always kind of changing how I'm evolving through that conscious process. But yeah, even if you just think about it this time of year.
Right, at least once a year. You think about, for me, I'd be concerned about my kids. What, are they going to be able to handle things, or that closet I have that's full of junk that nobody can clean but me. It's silly things, right?
Right.
But that's human, and that stays with us in those immediate moments before we can completely untether.
Yeah, and like you said, say those things that you would want to say, because yeah, have that beautiful exchange now.
So we have just a few more minutes, and this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you. It's been, for me, especially going through this right now, it's wonderful to go back into that conscious level of dying and death. But I want to switch gears real quick, because I also want to talk about that beautiful painting behind you and your artwork that you're doing. And so just for a few moments, let's go there.
Yeah, so I actually just finished this piece of artwork behind me, and it is the Meta Art Heal. So it's freshly done, and it's so powerful and so magnificent. And when we think about to heal, what does that mean? This is a far more profound perspective on that. And the beautiful piece of this is that there's a musical component to it, and my dear friend Anya Sarah has created toning through the whole process. She was on Zoom, and she was toning as I was channeling the painting. So it was really, really a beautiful process. Can I read a little bit of the transmission?
I'd like you to. Yeah, I'd love you, and I want you to just back up just a little bit and explain what this meta art is, just for those who don't know.
Sure. Yes. Meta art are they're automatic paintings. I channel them, and I'm channeling a specific frequency, whether it's peace or love or joy, and this one is heal. And so they emanate that frequency just as the painting themselves. But then when you meditate with them, or ocular meditation, you meditate with your eyes open, then the frequency goes in through your retina, straight to your hypothalamus, and directly to your pineal gland. So they bypass the intellect and your higher dimensions can interact directly with that frequency.
Okay, so go ahead and read.
Okay, I know we don't have much time. Okay. Healing is a form of evolution, plain and simple. If healing is required, some type of evolution is required, whether it be the cells or the mind, spirit, or heart. The soul is perfect and in never need of healing. Within the DNA of a person, each sentient being lies everything, including creation and destruction. The pendulum swings always. This conditioning or perceived reality is that if the pendulum swings too far towards creation, then you are a charlatan or against the way, whether it's Christianity or some other dogma, that you are simply not capable of healing. But this reality is changing now. A bravery is required to consider that you have the power of creation within you, for it is where you came. It is like saying to a child, you cannot possibly hold the biological traits of your parents, when in fact these biological traits are resonating even stronger, since within the timeline of this reality, that child resonance is closer to creation. In this time, when humanity is bringing into clearer vision the reality of destruction, so too it is bringing in this reality, this vision of creation. Heal sways the pendulum to creation and always away from destruction. That is all. Miracles are simply outward actions from this space within you that you perhaps do not yet understand. There are humans that can contribute to moving that pendulum with you. There's individuals here to support you, but the true power is within you. And there's more to it than that, but that's the transmission that came down from that meta space regarding heal. And I think it's so fascinating that that it's really focusing on creation.
Beautiful. And I just want to tie this back in to this whole conversation that we were speaking about death and consciousness and death and heal, and that heal creation. The death is that journey, and the creation is just part of it. It's that transition, recreation. And so to me, heal is the perfect place right now for all of us.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So thank you for leaving us on that note of heal. And Leanne, thank you as always for joining me.
And thank you so much for having me, Jen. It's a blessing.
And with that, I hope you will join me next week, or in a couple weeks. We'll have our next Adventures in Consciousness, the conversation. Until then, namaste.